Hello, Melissa Crook here at the Field Podcast. We've got ways to engage for you today with our episode Feeling to Healing with Carrie Pierce. Take time to consider your core wounds starting from childhood. Sit with the emotions that come up during the explorations that you do during this time while remembering that there are no good or bad emotions. I feel very strongly about that. Emotions are clues to help you to get to the bottom of the real issue. Healing yourself from the past continues to heal yourself into the future, setting you up for further success mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. We hope these ways to engage really make you sit down and think today as you're engaging with this episode we have with Carrie Pierce. Thanks so much for being with us. Hello, Field Podcast audience. Welcome back this week. I have a new friend here with me today. Her name is Carrie Pierce. I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation. Carrie has a really rich, multi-layered background. I think she's going to have a ton of insights to share, wisdom to share, a lot of thoughts about each of our talking points. And you'll see what I mean as we get into it. I've learned about Carrie from our good friends at Podmatch, and then her publishing company has been fantastic about keeping in contact and helping us get the information to each other that we needed. And so I'm really excited to have her here with me today. Carrie describes herself as tactful, strategic, and observant. Carrie Pierce, welcome to the Field Podcast.
Oh, hello, Melissa. Thank you so much. It's a true joy and an honor to be with you and your audience today. And I hope I can deliver on that wonderful introduction. No pressure there, right?
No pressure. And I'm very confident you're going to be just fine. I have a good feeling about this. Okay, let's get right into this because this is a really important topic for women. And I'm sure something that you've come across in different seasons of your life and also experienced how it's changed for you in different seasons of your life, depending on what you needed in that moment. And that's the idea of self-care in your life, prioritizing that, taking care of yourself. Like I said, you've gone through different seasons, you've had different experiences. So what you needed in one moment and one season may have changed in another season. So talk to me about your self-care journey and how you've learned to adapt to the different places and spaces you've been in to continue to find practices and time that work for you. I mean, when you and I got on, you were simply talked about the joy of sitting there, having a moment of quiet with your tea to just relax and not do anything. And I think we underestimate the value of that.
Indeed so. And, you bring up a really good point in how you describe the seasons of our lives and self-care and how that needs to shift. And for years and years, I was a caregiver to both of my parents. My father had a horrible journey through Lewy body dementia, which is the worst of the worst dementia. It brings a lot of hallucinations and violence with it. And Mom and I took care of him for many, many years until he unfortunately lost that battle. And, as you move through life, unaddressed traumas and pains and difficulties and stuffed feelings and emotions accrue. And if we don't take the time to deal with them, they do come up in certain different ugly ways, disease processes, anxiety, panic attacks, those kind of things. And so for a lot of years, my self-care was pretty much non-existent. It was as I could snatch it because I couldn't leave my dad alone too long, and I couldn't leave him alone too long with my mom because I was afraid that he would hurt her unwittingly. He never meant to. He was a very gentle man, but that's a very vicious disease. And so then Mom and I, after he passed, we had a couple of years of intense grief and a lot of PTSD from that experience. And we worked through that. In the remaining years of Mom's life, we tried to make as sweet as possible. And in that, we began to re-implement more with a concerted effort, self-care in an attempt to put ourselves back together And
Yeah.
then not only put ourselves back together, but then evolve from those experiences and find out who the heck we really were after that. So now that she has passed, and she died a couple years ago, just as the two of us moved to a new community to start a new
Mm.
life, she died very unexpectedly and left me alone.
Mm.
I have had to go through the component of self care for um, kind of triaging myself from all of
Mm.
that trauma and grief, and then learning who I really am at this stage in my life. So, self care was always a component of my life given my background. I started out in film and TV makeup, and I was an esthetician, and I gave facials and helped women with their own self-care for years. um, but I had to learn to apply it to this 60-year-old me, all
Mm.
alone, all by myself, with no one else to think about. And that, I think, brings a truly healing emotional component to self care. Most people think of self care as slap a mud pack on your face while you're cleaning the house or have a massage. That is a component of it. But self care is also resting well, sleeping
Mm.
well, staying hydrated, crying when you need to, feeling your feelings, laughing, eating well, taking your vitamins, all of those things, brushing your teeth more than twice a week when you're in grief. That's
Yes.
awesome here.
Yeah. No, but those are the things that come up.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I say this a lot because self-care it's one of those, niche phrases out there right now. And so I'm always really careful when I talk about this. I'm like, one, it's unique to everyone. And two, that self-care is healthcare. It's
Yeah.
meeting those basic needs. It's addressing all those parts of your health, the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. It's all those pieces. So if you can do the spa day and all those things, and that's a regular part of your care for yourself, great. But
Yes.
make sure you're tending to all the pieces of it. Um, because we'll get into this in a moment, because that emotional, mental, physical health connection is real, and you touched on it already, and we'll talk about it again in a moment. But yeah, it's the whole package, and being cognitive of where you are in the moment. And sometimes if you need to adjust, you might have a great menu or routine in place, but are you all of a sudden still feeling a little angstier? You're not feeling fulfilled, or it's not filling your cup the same way it used to. Take a
Mhm.
look at where you're at. What's changed? What how do you need to adjust it? And I think that's something that you touched on really well, of just all those different spaces and places that you go through. And you went through a series quite quickly too. So constantly being in flux with that, and just noticing what that does to you. Grief is complicated.
Oh
Um,
man.
it is
it's
com it is
it's
so, I mean,
astounding.
it really is. I mean, we lost both my in-laws within 5 months of each other in
Oh,
2023. My
I'm
mother-in-law
sorry.
had it's still a little bumpy, and my husband was very close with his parents. My mother-in-law had Alzheimer's, and
Mm,
so we had grieved her a while ago as she was, but then grieving that she's actually gone. And then 3 weeks later, my father-in-law had a stroke, and he never came out of the rehabilitation center and died 5 months later. They had been together since they were 12 years old. And
mm,
so I think, and a lot of and he had other health things going on before she passed, but he also spent a lot of time taking care of her. It, and so to have all of a sudden, we were expecting her to go. We expected to have him for another 5 to 10 years. And when that didn't happen, and that was probably an unrealistic expectation in our own heads, but that's kind of where we were. And he seemed to be bouncing back from all the stroke and all the things. And so when we got the phone call, we were at the end of our 30th anniversary trip, just coming back into the United States from Victoria, BC, and it's just happened so quick. So I say all that to say, I understand it. I've experienced it myself, and then watched my husband unravel it, and looked at, like, okay, these are the things we got to address now. You get through one hill of it, and you think you've come out of the valley, And then all of a sudden something hits you that you just aren't even expecting, you didn't even see coming. So
Yeah.
I wanted to spend some time saying all that to say that when you're in that mode, you have to be very attentive to what it is you need each day, because you never know what is going to impact you that you maybe didn't expect.
That is so very well said. And, I jotted a couple things down that I think are very important points. Talking about self care, there is external self care, and then there
Mhm.
is definitely internal self care. And
Mhm.
you bring up a really good point about caregivers.
Yeah.
Um, when mom died, it was just this compressed, incredible, traumatic experience. It came out of nowhere just as we were
Mm.
moving to a community where we had never been. We knew no one. We were all optimistic to start this new life. And
Mm.
she was eaten up with cancer, didn't even know.
Oh,
And
wow.
by the time she died, I was 25 pounds underweight. My hair
Mm.
was coming out. I had lived for 6 months on beef sticks and peanut butter because that's all I had time for. And I was completely, I had cannibalized myself just to keep going. I had no muscle left. I had broken heart syndrome, um,
Mm.
chest pains. I mean, it was just awful. I looked awful and I felt awful. And it took the first year and a half of intensive IV vitamin therapy, acupuncture, massive doses of vitamins, sobbing, crying, counseling, which I'm still in. I love counseling, but caregivers go first most of the time.
Yeah.
And I think this is why, because our needs just keep getting pushed to the side, pushed to the side, pushed to the side, and not only pushed to the side, they then are just buried under everything else that's rolling along. It's like a steamroller that's just rolling over you, and you can't, once it gets that tiny toe and rolls over your toe, then it just rolls over the rest of you and you can't get away.
Yeah.
So I do think it's important to note that self care is incredibly important. But if and when you are a caregiver and you are
Mhm.
fulfilling that role, which is an honor and a privilege to be able to do, it's
Mhm.
also potentially a death sentence if you don't take care of yourself, like you're in ICU yourself. It can be a death sentence, and so I think it's important to really hammer on that. And I'm so sorry that you guys had such loss in such a short period of time. There's never an easy way to lose a loved one,
Mm-mm.
but when you lose them incredibly close together, that really compounds things. And I think especially too when you lose loved ones over the holidays, that's
Yeah.
extremely cruel. It's
Mhm.
a completely different threshold of pain.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and it adds a layer to that time of year that you have that you're left to unpack, and you don't necessarily know until you come around the next time what it's going to do to you. So I think that's a really good point too. My friend Erin Copeland has been on here on the show, both the podcast and other shows that I've done on the internet, on the internet radio, and on our YouTube panels. And she now provides resources for caregivers, and she hits hard on the self-care piece and has a whole book, a whole manual. Um, she's on a variety of shows. She works with people, she coaches them through it because of that very thing you're talking about. And it is, you've got to take care. You cannot take care of anyone else if you are not taking care of yourself well. And so many times, I mean, we saw on my side of the family, some adopted family, and Grandpa Gene was taking care of Grandma Evie for years. She had Alzheimer's we didn't even know about because he was hiding it and protecting her. It was that generation. He was from that greatest generation. You didn't, I mean, he survived World War II. So nothing could really be worse than that. So you just didn't talk about those things. So he passed, kind of got very sick in mid-February, about, gosh, it's been about 12 or 13 years ago now, maybe 15 years ago. I think it's maybe 15 years ago next month. And went to the hospital and never came home. And it was such a shock. And then all of a sudden we were left, and the reality of how Grandma Evie actually was doing all came to the forefront quickly. And there had to be quick responses to care for her because we quickly realized she can't live alone. She can't and it took about 3 to 6 weeks to put together all the pieces of how far gone she actually was in her dementia. But the toll that it took on him for all those years. And so, yeah, and so it's like, so a message to those dealing with grief, those that are caregivers, take good care of yourselves. We've got resources to help you. We want to give you support in this. Know how valuable you are, and ask for help. That's a big thing that Erin
Oh,
talks about. Is
yes.
don't be afraid to ask for help, for support. And I'll put that link
Indeed.
to her stuff in our show notes, because this is such an important topic. And I'm so glad you hit on that for people to go back to and turn to, because it is such a valuable thing that gets ignored. Everybody asks how the person is being
Yep,
cared for is,
that's true.
and people don't always stop to ask how the caregiver's doing and
But you
what
can
they need.
always tell when a person
Yeah.
asks you as a caregiver or as you, the griever, and grief is also a killer.
Yes, it
There's
is.
caregiving, but grief on its own, whether you're caregiving for the person or not, grief on its own is a killer. And that's a
Yeah.
completely different, the whole entirely different show too. But
Yeah.
when you have been through the process, you know to look at the caregiver and to look at the griever. How are you? Are you eating? Are you sleeping? Are you really okay? Do you need help? Are you thinking about doing yourself in? Are you thinking about death a lot? Are you
Yeah.
okay? Are you crying? Are you able to be with your feelings? When you get somebody that asks you those questions, they have walked the path you're on. And
Yeah.
and most people, we are not a grief literate society, especially. They It's something to race through or ignore or just put a smile on and walk by real fast. I think and we sometimes tend to think of death, and I did for a long time when I
Mhm.
was younger, as like a virus we might accidentally contract and bring home to our loved ones. So we just want to hurry by it and just act like it doesn't
Yes.
exist. And,
Yeah.
and I think we have a tendency to do that. And unfortunately, death has a lot of really valuable lessons and blessings to bring.
Yeah.
And we face it with such fear and horror, like something has gone
Mhm.
hideously wrong when
Yeah.
somebody
Even
dies. When
though
the
it's
truth,
something we're all going to experience someday.
well, yeah, and it's perfectly natural and is part of the cycle of life. But we act like, oh my God, something is
Yeah.
horribly wrong. Something broke. God looked away for 2 seconds, and this hideous thing happened. And how could this possibly happen? It's this horrible, dismal accident. But it's not. And what I have had to learn, because mom was my best friend, and it was like three-fourths
Mm.
of me was amputated when she died. And I mean,
Mm.
I was walking around just this quivering raw lump of flesh. That was all
Mm.
that was left of me when she died, and she died in my arms.
Mm.
I watched her take her last breath. The last words I got to say to her was how much I loved her. It
Mm.
was a perfect death in terms of how death goes. My
Mhm.
father's was not. His was the exact opposite. It was hellish and horrible and terrifying. And but death and grief are enormously valuable teachers, and we tend to flee from them. We want to race through it. We want to get to the other side of it. There is no other side. And I
Yeah.
think you know this, having walked this path as well. This
Mhm.
is not like a river you're swimming across and you're going to get to the other side. There is no
Yeah.
other side.
Yeah.
And you have to learn to swim with the current. You have to learn to roll with the waves. But in the course of doing so, you develop muscles,
Mhm.
emotional muscles, spiritual muscles, mental muscles, physical muscles. You develop muscles that you could develop no other way. And it's kind of akin to a butterfly having to struggle to get out of the chrysalis, the cocoon. If
Mhm.
you help that butterfly, you kill it.
Yeah.
So you,
Yeah.
you have to go through these lessons to become fully blossomed as a soul and as a human. And that's a really important message. I know people don't want to hear it, but it's the truth.
Yeah, it is. And it's what enables you to move forward. I mean, I think, my husband and I took a trip to Ireland in September.
Oh,
This last fall, my mother-in-law was 100% Irish. She had been many times, I think, I don't know, 7 to 10 times over the years, and had done a lot of her own family genealogy and history. And so we had never been and had always wanted to go, but it was also kind of an homage to her to learn about those places that her family originally came from, and my husband's family, originally came
mhm.
from, and and walk those places that she walked in, and also have our own experience there. And it was we left a little over a year after my father-in-law's funeral. So we'd been kind of in this grief mode for about a year and a half at that point. And it was and it was such a valuable thing. And it was one of those things when I really looked at it as, and I talked to my husband a lot about this too, is like, not that our grief is over when we get home, but it feels like we've come full circle in this season. We've allowed ourselves the space and time, and we've know what we've learned from it. We know there's parts of this that will always be with us, but we can start taking steps forward. We can make sure we're doing the things health wise that we need to do for ourselves to live the life that we want to live, that they would want us to continue to live. So,
Yes.
and I think those are important pieces too. But people want to put a timeline on grief,
You can't
and
do that. There is none.
there is no timeline. And so I think it's still really hard to talk about it with people because they're like, oh gosh, your parent, your loved one, your spouse, your partner, your child, your best friend, whoever it was, they passed over a year ago now. Gosh, you're still in this place. And that's not, you have to get up out of bed. You got to put one foot in front of the other. But grief is multi-layered and nuanced. And so I think you bring up such a good point of taking those things you can learn from it. How do you want to live your life moving forward while you're still here based on what you've learned from that? And then when do you get those moments, those memories that bring tears or laughter or both? Sit with them, remember them, honor them, instead of
Yeah,
getting, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm still feeling this, because there's this societal pressure to hurry up and get through it. Welcome it in, move through it, because if you stuff it, it's going to come up in a very unhealthy way later. And it's
that's
just,
so true.
yeah,
It's so true. And
yeah,
what you bring up an interesting point. People that tell you you need to be over it by now, they have never lost anything that has really mattered to them. They just
yeah,
don't get it. And so
yeah,
people that are out there saying it's been a year, it's been 2 years, it's been 3 years, you can grieve somebody the rest of your life if you freaking want to, because that was your
yeah,
personal relationship. That was your personal loss. Nobody has a right to look at a wristwatch and tell you you should be here by now, you should be
yeah,
there by now. Even those stages of grief, they're misapplied and they're used incorrectly. But the thing that really stuck out to me that I think it's important to touch on, as you grieved for a year and then you went to Ireland, which my dad's side of the family is all from Ireland too. You had done grieving and then you had taken steps to move your grief into active mourning. And grief and mourning are
mm,
two very different things. I did
mm,
not know this until I started
yeah,
having to save my own life alone in the fetal position, alone in my little house, in my little community, all by myself, learning this stuff. Grief is grief. That's what you feel. It's the
mhm,
internal process of loss and the horrible heartache and all the awfulness that comes with it, all of those feelings. But if you don't move it into active mourning, which is the moving grief out of you tangibly through you by crying, by going to counseling, by journaling, by putting together little memoriam pieces to your loved one, by doing steps to honor your grief and to deal with your grief. That's what mourning is. And without the act of
yeah,
mourning, um, you don't you don't move on, you don't heal. And that is
yeah,
something that I do wish we still allowed. It boggles my mind that when you lose an astounding loved one, you get 3 days off at work and then you're expected to be back and like
I
everything's fine.
know.
In our old ways of doing things, older society, Victorian times, women, when they lost their husbands, they wore black for a year. They wore
Yeah.
veils for a year. The husbands that were widowed, the children that had lost parents wore black armbands for a year at least, to tell the other people that would be coming into contact with them, I'm in mourning, please be kind. I need you to be
Yeah.
extra kind. I'm in mourning. We don't we don't know when we leave our house every day who we are encountering that is barely holding it together because they just lost somebody. And
Yeah.
since the advent of the office horrible COVID stuff, we encounter young children in today's world that have lost
Mm.
parents. And
Mhm.
and we encounter struggling little hearts and souls every day out there. And we have no idea. We honk at them because they're not driving like we think they should. We yell at them at the clerk at the grocery store, and she's barely able to hold it together. I When mom died,
Yeah.
for 4 months after she died, I would be shopping for groceries at our grocery store. I would have to leave my full cart and run and get in the car and drive home. I would have to leave my cart full of groceries on aisle 7 because I had to just
Mm.
get out of there and go home and sob. And one
Mm.
of the hospice counselors I talked to, and God bless her, I think of her so often, she laughed and she said, that's job security for somebody at the grocery store.
I love
So,
that.
yeah, if you have to run out and leave your full cart on aisle 7 because you can't cope and you have to race home and cry, they pay somebody to look for people like you and go and put the stuff up. So you're actually giving somebody job security. And
I
that
love
took
that.
all the pressure off. It was wonderful.
That's the most empathetic response. I love that so much. Gosh, so many good things there, Carrie. I'm so thankful for this. And that's why I knew this conversation was going to be so rich. Thank you for all of that. So good. And I'm going to move into now and into confidently setting boundaries in your life around your time. I mean, like again, going back to the seasons, you've had seasons in your life where there were none. Sometimes because there couldn't be. Um, and so, but you also have a very busy work life of your own writing and helping other writers and protecting your time there, knowing what stories to take on that fit, knowing what stories that don't. So there's a lot of different spaces and places for you where I imagine figuring out how to manage your time and still take care of yourself well have come up. So talk to me about your journey with that.
Well, I think to be an artist of any sort, and
Mhm.
I can tell by speaking to you, you are one as well, you have to have tendencies toward being an empath.
Yeah.
And what that sets you up for, and it certainly did for me, so I'm speaking from my own personal experience, for many decades, as an empath, you're basically prey.
Yeah.
You're prey for predators because you're nice, you're a people pleaser, you care too much, you take on people's problems, you feel people's emotions you're constantly nurturing, and you're traipsing through the world spewing all of this love on everybody, thinking if I fill up these holes enough with love, the world will be a better place and these people will be happier and healthier, and just love, love, love. Well, you end up being preyed upon by every type of predator that comes along. And I
Yeah.
think at some point, life pummels you to the point where you have to learn how to set boundaries. And what I've recently been learning about that is the concept of a dark empath. And it sounds
Mm.
horrible, but it's really not. And so for years as a writer, I just felt everything. I felt everybody's
Mm.
everything. I felt all the angst in the world. I mean, otherwise you're not a good writer. And I think it was Robert Frost that said, "No tears in the writer, no tears in the reader." So you have to
Mm.
feel in
Mhm.
order to be a good writer, because otherwise, what's the point? You're not reaching anybody through the words that you're putting on a page. You're not compelling.
Yeah.
But after life kind of pummels you, you realize you do have a right to set boundaries, and boundaries are very important. Boundaries are so much more than just running a good schedule.
Mhm.
What I had to learn was when you say no to someone or something, you're actually saying yes to yourself. And
Yeah.
I had to really struggle with that because we're not raised, most of us, and to say yes to ourselves or to acknowledge our weaknesses or to acknowledge our needs. We're not
Yeah.
raised, nice
No.
people don't do that. That's selfish.
Mm-hmm.
But when you become a dark empath, what that actually means is you are a highly empowered, still open, still loving, still nurturing person, but you can smell a predator from 10,000 miles away. And before they get to you, they no longer have the right to gnaw on your hide like a hyena.
Yeah.
So I have had to learn this in the last couple of years in counseling, and I've had to spend a lot of time delving into my past childhood and my upbringing and all of that. And I think anybody that cares about healing should do that. You
Mm-hmm.
can't heal if you don't look at all of your childhood core wounds because we're
Yeah.
driven by our core wounds.
Yeah.
And so, in terms of setting boundaries, what I had to really sit with was the concept of the importance of the pause and
Mm.
allowing the pause to be there. And most empaths, and I think a lot of women, cannot cope with the pause well. We
Mm-mm.
feel like if there's a lull in a conversation, it's our fault. It's our responsibility to keep things lively and moving along and be the perfect hostess. It's not. And we also don't deal well, or at least I don't, with liminal spaces.
Mm.
And so I had to sit with the concept of liminal spaces for a long time. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't do well with liminal spaces. And liminal spaces are things like airports or hallways where you're leaving one known point and you're traversing through the unknown to get to the next known point. So that's
Mm-hmm.
really what the definition of a liminal space is. But liminal space happens in our lives all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Divorce is a liminal space, separation, death is a liminal space. We are traversing from what life used to be and who and what we used to be through an unknown, very uncomfortable wilderness, a lot of darkness, a lot of unknown, a lot of aloneness in this wilderness, to where we come out the other side into the light, a completely new person with a
Yeah.
completely new life.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order to set successful boundaries for me, I had to sit with the fact that liminal space has to happen. It has to happen. And we need to find a way to be comfortable with it while it is happening and to make the most of it, which is where self care ties back in.
Yeah.
But also, we need to understand that the magic happens in the pause.
Mm.
Um, in music, that's where you're touched the most, is in the pause between the
Mm-hmm.
notes. In life, it's the same thing. And in poetry, it's the same thing. The
Yeah.
pause between the words, the pause between the syllables, the inflection. That's where all the magic happens. And so once you realize all of that, at least in my personal journey, once I realized all of that, I came to the conclusion that it is possible and very necessary to set healthy boundaries, to say yes to myself and no to other things more than I had in the past, and to make peace with the fact that in doing so, that does not make me selfish. That makes me more effective as a tool to be used by God.
Yeah.
And I know that's like a grand statement to make. I'm not saying I'm this, but it works that way for anybody.
Yeah.
When you protect yourself, and not in a conceited way or a self-absorbed way, that is not the way to do it. That is not
Mm-hmm.
the way to go about it. But
Yeah.
when you set healthy boundaries, that frees you to be more effective and be more productive and offer more to life and to those people that cross your path. So I hope that makes sense.
It does. And it allows space. I love the pause because I was not good at the pause for years. And I've had to learn to get comfortable in sitting in the quiet and unknown and letting the things that needed to unfold to me, that I needed to address and feel and acknowledge and move through, happen.
the silence is very important, and we are taught to fear it. And God speaks in a still small voice,
Yeah.
and he's a gentleman, and he doesn't force himself on us into our lives, and he doesn't scream and holler, and it's all in the silence, and we have to quit being afraid of it.
Yes, yes. And allow what needs to happen into it. And I also love the pause when you're thinking about whether you're going to say yes or no to something. That allows you the time to really consider if this is in alignment with your purpose, if this is really in alignment. Feel it in your body. How does it feel? Does it feel like a match? Does it feel authentic? Does it feel forced? It just really allows you to make good decisions. And then, like you said, then you can be available to yourself and the people that you are giving your time to in such a productive, authentic, energized way and not depleted and wondering how you got there. I mean, and there's such a
Yeah.
difference when you learn how to accept that and move through that and sit in the quiet. And it takes so much pressure off having to fill the gaps all the time.
Oh, indeed so. And you bring up an interesting point. If you continue to force yourself to help people, you're no longer doing that out of love. You're doing it out of
Yeah.
resentment. It's building resentment, and it's an
Yeah.
obligation. And then you just hate everything. You hate them. You're mad at yourself. It's not a loving thing like it should be. And I two things I wrote down while you were talking. Um, my counselor, I learned from my counselor, and this was such a mind blowing concept. The very simple but all empowering phrase, let me think about that and I'll get back with you. That's all it takes to get
Mm.
you out of that uncomfortable spot. We do not ever feel we have the right to say that. Let me think about that and I'll get back with you. Let me think about that.
Yeah.
That's all it takes. And I have a dear relation that she's so loving, and she had such a hard time setting boundaries. She could never say no. And
Mhm.
the rest of people, they were constantly taking advantage of her for that fact, because they knew she was a pushover. She could never
Mm.
say no. She would never say
Mhm.
no. Even if she could, she would
Yeah.
never say no. Well, finally, life pummeled her to the point where she had to work through all of these things and start learning to set boundaries. And she got into counseling. She did something I thought was so brilliant. And my mom and I used to marvel at this. She took a little clear fishbowl, and she sat down one day and she wrote on little pieces of paper 45 extremely legitimate excuses as to why she couldn't do something. And she cut them in little pieces of squares and folded them and put them in the little fishbowl by her phone. And so
Wow.
when people would call with their demands, because she knew she couldn't lie
Yeah.
successfully, she was a horrible liar, they would know she was lying. She she would rifle around very quietly while they were, saying, I need you to do this, and I want you to do this, and blah, 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 and this and that. She would reach into the bowl and she would pull a piece of paper out, and she would, when it was her time to talk, with great feeling and sincerity, she would read the excuse on the piece of paper. And then once she used an excuse, she would throw it away so she didn't accidentally use it again on the same person. And it really wasn't lying,
You're
because
right.
they were legitimate excuses, and she didn't have to hurt their feelings by hemming and hawing and obviously lying. And it
Yeah.
saved her life until she learned, let me think about that and get back with you. I don't know if I'll be able to help you with that or not. Until she was able to do that in lifetime, it was
Sure.
just a little helper to do that. But we thought it was just brilliant.
It really is. It's so brilliant because it gives your mind, your subconscious, the time to adjust to the new habit of saying no. When you haven't been used to it, it doesn't put you of like you're stumbling and you're trying to come up with something in the moment and you're not thinking of it because you're not used to showing up that way. It gives you that immediate response, and that allows time to learn that new habit, for that new habit to feel right and safe and good like it is. That is brilliant. I love that.
Oh, no, I could see her doing it. She was so
Yeah,
gracious. But here's the thing: you don't want to say no all the time, because then you are
absolutely.
selfish. But when you help someone, or you agree to do something for someone, you want to do it out of love and out of
Yes.
care and out of being genuine
Yeah.
and
And
not out of a
authentically
sense.
wanting to be there and be a part of
Yes.
it.
But
Yeah.
obligation, it just sucks the magic out of everything.
It really does. It really does. Oh, so good. Thank you so much for that. That sentence is so key. That just let me think about that and I'll get back to you. That's your takeaway today, folks.
That's right.
Ladies, that is it. If you get nothing, and there's been a lot of gems thrown already, but if you get nothing else out of this, that is your go-to. And it just buys you time for the pause.
And then there's one other one that's equally as good, the phrase, and I used to try to get my mom to say this because she was horrible at this too. I'm sorry that doesn't work for me. Now that sounds a little bit
Mm,
more selfish, I have to admit, but I'm sorry that doesn't work for me.
yeah.
That's the schedule doesn't. I'm sorry that doesn't work with my schedule. I'm sorry that doesn't work for this obligation I've already committed to. I'm sorry that doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Maybe next time. So that's the next one. That's the other one.
Yes, that's a follow. Very good. Thank you so much, Carrie. Those are awesome. I love those. And such simple phrases, but with so much power in them. So I love that so much. And easy to remember. Write those down by your, put a note in your cell phone. Put the sticky note on your mirror if you need to remember those. So good.
Oh,
Okay. You touched on this already, but we're going to come back to it and dive into it a little more. Taking care of our emotional health, our mental health, our physical health, our spiritual health. We know we've touched on it already. If we stuff and ignore and don't deal with things, they're going to manifest themselves in a very, very harmful way to us. So, talk to me about your experience with that, what you've learned from that as you've gone through these seasons where that's shown up for you.
well, if I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like we're talking about again touching on core wounds.
Yeah.
Is that true? Um, Pretty much what humanity boils down to, in my opinion, and I observe a lot of humanity a lot because I'm a writer,
Yeah.
and before I was a writer, I was in the film industry, so that teaches you to look at things and see things in a different way. Basically, every person that is alive that we encounter operates from unhealed, unaddressed core wounds.
Hmm.
Core wounds drive us until they are healed.
Yeah.
The decisions we make, the relationships we get into, and we touched on earlier before we started the show, we were having a conversation about promiscuous young women and where in some cases that actually comes from sexual child abuse, child
Hmm.
sexual abuse.
Yeah.
But we judge people by their behaviors and we judge people by their choices without stepping back and really observing what is that driving factor beneath all of that.
Yeah.
And so until we sit with those unhealed, unaddressed core wounds, and usually by the time we're 5 or 6, we've encountered the first one or two at the very least. That's usually where the first big thing in life
Yeah.
steamrolls over us. Um, until we deal with those layers of the onion, we are being driven by every single decision we make, every feeling that we feel, every emotion we have, every thought that we think, pretty much every belief system that we have. It's all driven by those core wounds. Um, so to to finally get to the place in life, and usually it comes later for most people,
Hmm.
where we can then turn back to our little self that was 5 years old and reach back for that little self and heal
Hmm.
that little self. We're
Yeah.
not whole.
Yeah.
And that is, I think, where the spiritual, emotional walk is so important, because you can only heal so much physically without healing emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It's
Yeah.
it's not going to work.
No, no, because it'll show up. I mean, I think there's so many ailments and
Yep.
diseases that show up as a result of these things that we've stuffed and not move through and not process. We're anxious, we're depressed, we've got high blood pressure, we've got, all these different things because of this way it's manifesting through our bodies. And so thank you for that. It was such a good explanation of that. I appreciate that so much. And it just brings the empathy back to think about, get curious rather than judgmental. First
Yeah.
with yourself and also with other people.
Yeah. And I think what helped me do that, and then there's one other quick thing to touch on with this, was learning to ask what else might also be true. When you look at a situation, or you're judging a person, or you're judging a situation, or you come to a snap decision about something, and I'm not saying second guess your gut instincts, because gut instincts are always right, and I think
Yeah.
they're there for a reason. Those need to be paid attention to. But when you're in your head and you're judging situations, or you're judging people, or you think you have read a situation, it's always, and again, goes back to the pause, take a breath, sit with it for a moment, and then say, well, what else might also be true in this situation? And that's what a good writer will do.
Yeah.
What else might also be true in this plot? What else might also be true with this character? And by doing so, you're opening up a whole aspect of life and living and feeling and being and doing that never otherwise gets opened up.
Yeah. Oh, that was so good. Thank you for that. I love that you added that on. That's so important to think about, and really a powerful thing that, if again, it's getting ourselves to stop. If we can give ourselves just a few seconds, a few minutes, we're such a do go go society that there's so much power. We can minimize so much of the issues, problems, damaging things we say and do if we just stopped and paused for a moment and thought about
Yeah.
what else could be true here. That's a key question. Thank you. Oh, that's good.
Mhm.
So good. All right. Living unapologetically, both supporting yourself in it and other women in it. Talk to me about your journey with that, what that looks like for you. I would say that a lot of what you do in your writing world, the possibilities that you offer people is a portion of that. But talk to me about your journey with that.
Of learning to live unapologetically. I'm still arriving at
Mm-hmm.
that wonderful destination. It's
Yeah.
been 60 years in the making. I think until we heal, we are
Yeah.
constantly apologizing, or we're feeling constantly inferior. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of secret shame that's there that we carry, and all of this stuff. But it takes a hell of a lot of work undoing all of that to get to the place where you can finally be and
Yeah.
be unapologetically.
Yeah.
Um, so, a component for me in that is working to keep my senses, my heart, and my spirit alive as I get older.
Mm.
We tend to get jaded, and even our
Yeah.
tastes and our sense of smell kind of dull with age.
Mhm.
We have to we have to approach life as though everything is art, which I believe it is. The food that you
Mm.
cook is art. The way you put it on your plate is art. The clothes that we wear is art. The perfume that we pick is art. The soap that we bathe in is art. How we decorate our homes is art. How we carry ourselves out in public, it's art. Everything is art. And so I think we have to work to stay alive on every level, and to
Mhm.
not be jaded and become hardened and cynical, which I
Mhm.
think we are programmed societally to do and be. And I
Yeah.
think what you said about constantly being driven, that's done to us on purpose.
Yeah, we
Because
absolutely.
if we're constantly distracted, or we're constantly racing, then we can't sit in the silence and hear God. We can't
Yeah.
sit and commune with spirit. And I
Yeah.
think it's done to us on purpose, but that's just probably for another show. So, living unapologetically, I'm only just now learning to do.
Mm.
And it's been a
Yeah.
60-year journey. Um, I think in order to do that successfully, and in order to get there successfully, you pretty much have to take all of the steps we've just talked about.
Yeah.
You have to grieve, you have to feel, you have to heal your core wounds, you have to look back at your childhood and programming, things that weren't healed. from back then. You have to set boundaries. I mean, all of this that we've discussed today actually leads to then the freedom and the wisdom and the ability to live unapologetically. So, applying it to my writing and ghostwriting for people and working with authors and with Morgan Pierce, the publishing house, it is wonderful to work with someone to help them really get their voice and use their voice effectively. That is the beauty of the written word. It's different than the spoken word or the word that is released in song. There's a tremendous amount of power in words. And in terms of living unapologetically, I grew up with my father always saying to me, and I've just now come to where I really appreciate it. I always applied it in my life because I saw the wisdom in it, but I never really truly appreciated it. Mean what you say and say what you mean. That simplifies everything.
And
really
if you
can live that same way, then that gets you to the living unapologetically part. So I don't know if I've answered that question or not.
You actually answered it beautifully. I loved all of that. And no, that was a really, really good explanation of that and how you've arrived at that. And it is a journey. And I think, continue being a learner. That's the one way, that I have learned. I'm 55. So I am on this journey too. And it really wasn't until 5 years ago that I really started unpacking all of it. I'd done pieces of it along the way, but I hit a wall and I had some things that really got my attention that made me really sit back and be like, all right, it's time to get really serious about this process. And the most valuable thing I've learned, and I've really learned it, I think, especially the last 10 years through some different seasons and experiences, is just continue being a learner. Stay curious. Be willing to be like, okay, I used to believe that, but I've learned this now. So this is now, I now feel differently, or it's broadened my view on this. I mean, just continue to, it keeps you fresh. It keeps you aware. It keeps you feeling alive. You don't get stagnant. Evolving. Exactly. So I love what you said about all of that.
But, you are very young for your age. You look, because I would have thought, maybe 40 by looking at you. So, but this brings up something that ties into the living unapologetically. I think age, if seen as the gift that it actually is, because it beats the hell out of the alternative, right? So
absolutely,
age is a gift. Is a gift. But when a woman hits menopause, not only does it do stuff to her brain and emotions, and andropause in a man does this too, but we don't allow them. They're not allowed their emotions and loss.
Oh yeah, from a very young age.
Oh yeah. But when a guy hits andropause, he just races off for testosterone supplements because he's supposed to be virile and the little blue pill and all this stuff, and we don't talk about it. But and I used to write health and beauty articles aimed at midlife men and women. I did that for many years, and my desire at that time was to bring men and women together in midlife so that andropause in a man and menopause in a woman could be the gift it was meant to be, actually allow them to come together with the masks dropped, being very human as they move through the aging process. So when a woman goes through menopause and the aging starts to physically happen, if she is wise, in my opinion, she will make peace with that process instead of racing off to the plastic surgeon to get nipped and tucked repeatedly, because there's nothing more unapologetic and also nothing more attractive, in my opinion, as somebody that used to be in the beauty industry, than an older woman who is comfortable in her skin, no matter what she looks like, and is engaged actively in life. That is a sexy damn woman.
I love that. Yes, that's
Okay,
so
good. So
good.
that's just my personal opinion about all of that. But
I love that.
so that's where unapologetically living comes in. You either get there willingly, or life's going to pummel the hell out of you and force you to get there. So you can do it kicking and screaming, or you can do it, just happy and skipping along the way. So I'm just throwing that out there.
No, that's really good. I love that so much. And I want to point out too, and I haven't thought about this before, with the andropause and the menopause, we notice a word at the end that you and I have already talked about today.
Yes.
Pause.
Yes.
Take a pause. Take a look at your life. Take note of where you are. Where do you want to be? Are you on that track, or do you need to dive into some things, heal some things, move into something, let some things go? Take the pause and think about, what do you want this next season of your life to look like? This isn't the end. It's just the beginning of another season. True. And so taking that pause too, so that you can show up continually, unapologetically as your authentic self, the way you were designed to be.
Yes, beautifully said. Beautifully said. Okay, that was just
okay. We've solved that problem. Awesome. All right, check that off. We did it. Okay, everybody run with that.
Yes.
Okay. The importance of setting and coming back to your why and your values in everything you do. You are faced all the time with decisions to make on what you're going to engage with, time-wise, content-wise, who you're going to work with, who you're going to surround yourself in and out of your workspace. So talk to me about where those why and values come into play with that.
Wow. Wow, that's a question. I think the first time I encountered that was when I was working in Hollywood in the film industry back in the 80s. So I was in my early to mid 20s at the time. Mm-hmm. And it was disturbing out there anyway for many reasons. Yeah. But I was given a script, and I was a special effects makeup artist. I was given a script that had the most horrible special effect they wanted me to devise. And it basically consisted of peeling this woman's skin off while she was alive. This guy was going to come in. But it didn't have anything to do with the movie. It had nothing to do with the script, but they had to have this scene in it. And I remember reading the script and sitting there, and I thought, I can't do this. Yeah. This is totally gratuitous. I asked the director why it was even in the script, and he later admitted to me that the producer hated his wife and they were going through a hideous divorce, and this was what he fantasized about doing to her but couldn't, because he didn't want to go.
Talk about core wounds affecting your decisions.
Yeah, exactly. And so that was the first time I ever really realized I have a right to say no, even though I'm in this field, and I've worked hard to have these skills and to be here. I have a right to say, I'm sorry, this doesn't work for me. Yeah. But it was still very hard to do, and I paid a big price for it. But I turned down that film because I just could not devise that makeup for that effect. That had absolutely no reason to be in the film. And so there is a lot of freedom that comes from living a life that is aligned with your values and your why. If you forget your why, it's very easy to get blown off track. Yeah. And most people forget their why. Once you disengage from your why, then you lose the rudder, and you just kind of eventually float out into the middle of the ocean, and you have no rudder because your why's gone. So the why is very important. And the why does not stay consistent and solid throughout your life. As you evolve, absolutely, your why should evolve, and you need to make peace with that and let it be so. But the why fundamentally at its core should kind of always stay the same, in my opinion. But values, as an artist, it's hard to do your best work if you're working on something that doesn't resonate with you or that you don't care about or that fundamentally flies in the face of everything that you hold dear, you can't do
Mhm.
your best work. And I
Yeah.
think if you're living a life that is out of alignment with your values, then you're living a life that is not bringing out the best in you, and you're contributing to life in a manner that does not bring the spice, if you
Yeah.
will. So again, I don't know if that makes sense. A dear friend of mine said something to me about a month and a half ago that I've thought about a lot and it really resonated with me. She said, I envy you. And I think about it a lot because I'm not married and this person is. And she
Mhm.
said, you set the tone in your home all the time. You have the freedom to set the tone in your
Mm.
home. When you get up in
Mhm.
the morning, your home is going to flow how you need and want it to flow. That is a total luxury. And I'd never looked at it that way before. And I
Hmm.
spent a lot of time looking at that. And I realized that my whys and my values, I'm living them now,
Mhm.
but there was a period where I felt loss around them and I questioned if I'd made the right decision. And it was hard.
Yeah.
I never married, but, I was in long relationships and I never got married, did not have kids for health reasons, couldn't have
Mhm.
kids. And so here I sit older. I wish sometimes tremendously that things had been different or I had made better choices. See, that's the thing. My
Mhm.
core wounds were driving me. So consequently, I
Mm.
did not pick healthy men. And I that's the thing. If you don't address your core wounds, then your choices, you pick things to just continue working out those unaddressed
Oh, yeah.
issues. And
Absolutely.
so that's where counseling comes in. That's so important because it finally helps you break that cycle. But I'm living honestly now the life that I always knew, even as a little girl, that I would live. I never saw myself
Mm.
married as a little girl.
Mm.
I always saw myself as a writer, although I didn't know the first thing about it. Now I am. It was like an inner programming that I'd been designed with, but
Mhm.
there were a lot of painful years. There were a
Yeah.
lot of years of that seemed like drifting,
Yeah.
but now I know that they weren't. Um, it was hibernating. It was
Yeah.
just
Ooh,
gestating.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
And,
we need
and so
those winter seasons too. I think,
yeah.
we need the winters. We want to live in summer all the time, but we need the winters.
hmm Wintering is a lovely, very important thing.
Yeah.
And I do think it goes back to the pause. That is where most of
Mhm.
the magic happens, is in the wintering, where we
Mhm.
sit alone and we sit in the silence and we question and we look and we ask and we poke and we rehash and we make peace with. And it's very important. And what
Yeah.
comes after winter? Spring and blossoming.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. I love that. Oh, thank you. So good. All right. Living out of your own expectations versus others. You've really just described that. I mean, you have really done that over time, over learning how to do that. And I think sometimes, and I feel like boundaries and values and expectations, they all are intertwined within each other and it requires good communication, but it's something you have to grow into because working in the movie industry, I mean, my gosh, talk about a land of expectations that everybody else wants to impose upon you, but,
Mhm.
and you talked about, well, you were talking about values, how you had to say no to something because it just wasn't aligned with your values. That's a hard thing to do when you're in
Yeah.
your 20s trying to start out in a tough industry already. So talk to me about that expectations piece and how that has evolved through time because it's something very clearly that you operate out of.
I'm not okay. Can you clarify that for me a tiny
Yeah,
bit? Because I'll try to.
you very clearly live out of your own expectations versus other people's expectations of you through
Mhm.
choices you've made in all the different seasons and parts of your life. Is that something that was natural to you Or is that something you had to learn over time? Because you did it early on in the movie situation. You tapped into your own expectations of yourself to live out of your values. A lot of 20-year-olds, and no shame on them, would have taken that job anyway because they would have been afraid of the consequences of saying no to an opportunity at that point in their career.
Well, that was there. I mean, it was there. I needed to eat and I needed money, but not that bad. And so I think,
Yeah.
so I am grateful for that. I had two very dear parents, and I think they were an incredible mix. My father was a sweet, sweet man with a very dry, wicked sense of humor. He was a Texan named Billy Jack, and he was an air traffic controller. So with my father, there was a great deal of stay inside the lines, because if you don't, people die.
Yeah.
As an air traffic controller. And again, the say what you mean and mean what you say. And he also taught me, if you give your word to someone, you keep it no matter what. Well, so I lived most of my life with that. I do think giving your word to someone is extremely important. Keeping it is extremely important. It is a bond. But he taught me, even if it kills you. So I had to unlearn that part of it.
Yeah.
That little part.
Yeah. So any good thing done too extreme turns into a bad thing real quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. So I just recently removed that part, and I still, my word is my bond, and I keep my word, but no longer would I let it kill me. But
right.
My mom, on the other hand, was a jazz singer and just magical. She was just magic in flesh. And she loved life. She had many, many tragedies and traumas in her life. And every day she got up, even the day before she died, she got up wondering what she was going to be when she grew up. And she loved life. I don't know how she did it with all of the losses she had in her life. I don't know how she had such magical passion for this earthly plane and being alive, but she did. And so I think I'm very grateful to both of them, because Mom instilled in me values as well. And the importance of being articulate and understanding words. She loved a lyric. She could deliver a lyric like Tony Bennett and Frank Sinatra. I mean, she understood lyrics. And I think that's where my love of words comes from, my appreciation of words. They're extremely powerful. But I think the combination of the two of my folks gave me a balance that I wouldn't have gotten any other way. So I have the big, wonderful, artsy fartsy, magical, side. And then I have my kind of still stay inside the lines because people could die sides, but it's blended in a way. So again, I'm not sure I'm answering your questions, because we go down a rabbit hole and then it leads to another one. So I'm not really sure. Have I answered that?
Yeah. You had guidance. You had these. I love the different, how you blend these two different parts, and then it builds a framework for you to live off, to make sure you're living true to yourself, to make sure you're living authentic to yourself, and to sense when you're getting off kilter, like, okay, can't do this till it kills me. Got to swing back in and make sure that I'm meeting myself in a place that's actually healthy for me. It gives that framework for you to do that.
Well, there is another component that I should probably throw in there then, now that I'm thinking of it, not to interrupt you. When I was 11, I was extremely ill, and horribly ill, and continued to be for a few years. And it turned out to be celiac disease, which, of course, back in the 70s, nobody had ever heard of.
No.
And I mean, I had it horribly: brain swelling, seizures. It was horrible. My skin coming off in sheets. And Mom prayed and prayed and prayed. Nobody could find out what was wrong with me. And she just prayed that God would intervene. And she woke up in the middle of the night one night saying, "It starts with a C. It starts with a C." And my dad sat up and he said, "What are you having a nightmare? What are you talking about?" She said, "No, what's wrong with Carrie starts with a C." And so that next day, she packed a little lunch and she went to the local health food store, and she got this big, huge health encyclopedia out, and she went through all of the C's. And she finally got late
Wow.
in the afternoon to celiac disease. I had every one of the symptoms. And
Wow.
so that led to years of megavitamin therapy, and it led to years of diet changes that, of course, made me a social pariah as a teenager because I couldn't eat everything that a teenager eats and I couldn't go to parties.
Yeah.
But she told me one time, I know this is very hard for you now, and I know you feel left out of life. I need you to trust me that there will come a time in your life where you will look back on this and realize what a gift it is because it will save
Mm.
you from a lot. And
Mm.
I am I I'm at that stage now. I can't eat junk.
Mhm.
So my diet is very healthy. I'm healthier than most people my
Mhm.
age. And because I that hit me in my formative years, I had to live and think and do and be outside of the box, outside of the norm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I think that is another very important component. And for many years, I was ashamed to talk about that. It brought shame and
Mm.
embarrassment to me.
Yeah.
Um, and my mom was very open about it. But, it was like, well, that's my personal story. I kind of don't want people to know I was such a freak. But now I do see it and now I do
Yeah.
get it. And it was an astounding blessing, but it made me have to think for myself. I had to,
Mm.
at an early age, say, no, I can't have that. Do you
Yeah.
have this instead? No, I can't eat that. I can do this instead. No, I don't feel
Mm.
good today. So I'll do this over here instead because I'm not feeling well today. So I had
Yeah.
to grow up in a completely different way than most people did. And I
Yeah.
am very grateful for that now. And again, it boils back to what we were talking about at the first of the show, which is the pain of loss and trauma and grief and how life pummels you and demands things of you. But there are blessings at every turn.
Mhm.
Sometimes we just have to really dig hard and deep to get them.
Yeah.
So that's a
Yeah.
component I'm glad I didn't forget to
That
share
was
with you.
a really good component and an excellent example. Thank you so much. And yeah, I mean, I understand that celiac, peanut allergies, those things were not things that were talked
Oh,
about. And even when I was raising my girls and they're in their, well, my oldest is 30 and the mid to late 20s, it was just starting to be talked about when they were growing up and they had friends that dealt with these things. They still was kind of that stigma around of like, oh, we have to make things that way because
yep.
this kid, kind
Oh,
of
you're
thing.
one of those. You're one
Yeah,
of the.
yeah, and it was just so brutal what we did to those poor kids, what societally and culturally we did to these kids. You have no control over that, and it's
Yeah.
literally a life and death situation.
Here's the other thing, carry it even further. Back in the 70s, because there is such a nervous system component, and now we're realizing that everything is in the gut, your immune
Yeah,
system, your emotions, how your brain works, it's all in the gut. I mean, the things we're learning about gut health today are just staggering and way past due.
yeah.
But back when I had celiac disease, most of the time they institutionalized people.
Wow.
And so, how many people do we have in mental
Gee.
institutions that actually just can't handle gluten or they have food sensitivities that have impacted their brain chemistry? I mean,
Wow.
that is something I wish people would look at. I know of people that have lived their entire lives in mental institutions
Wow.
that once they were put on a gluten-free diet, immediately within weeks they were perfectly fine, or
Wow.
niacin deficiency and schizophrenia, all of those things. I mean, people need to pay attention to that.
Yeah, and ask those questions and don't be afraid to
Yeah.
advocate for yourself in those areas. Oh my
Amen.
gosh.
But
Yeah,
we have to advocate for ourselves in every way, and we
we
should.
do.
And that is the ultimate self-care, is self-advocacy.
Yes, and living unapologetically, all those
Yes.
things. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Ooh, that was good. Thank you for that. Thank you so
Mhm.
much for sharing that. Um accepting the layered aspects of ourselves. You've been talking about this really already, but accepting all those parts and pieces of our stories that make up who we are, the parts we love, the parts we don't love. You've talked about grief and growing up with celiac and when no one knew what it was, and different relationships over time, and saying no to things because to follow your values and all these pieces make up the layers of our story. Talk to me about that you're accepting that because you have accepted it, you have acknowledged it, you understand the importance of dealing with those core wounds and healing those things. What would you say to someone, because you've really done this, you've accepted the layered aspects of yourself, and that's a marvelous thing and a very freeing thing when you're able to do that. What would you say to someone who's struggling with that notion of layers?
Well, when you have all that work in front of you, it really, and pardon me for being crude, it really sucks when somebody says, "Oh, we got to peel this layer back." And healing is like an onion. You have to peel this layer, and then another disease pops up, and then you have to peel that. You don't want to hear that. You just like, I just want to
No.
get on with it. Let's just get on with it. I don't have time for all this peeling crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crap. Let's get on with it. But the fact of the matter is, and again, like we talked about with the pause and that the layers, that's where all the spice is.
Mm.
And you can you can keep sweeping things under your rug until you have this giant mountain with a tiny rug over it, a whole mountain of crap with a tiny little rug over the top of it. That can be your life. Or you can sit with a little whisk broom and a dustpan and you can go through the dirt and you can scoop a little at a time and filter it and sift it and throw it away and then vacuum your nice little flat rug. And that can be your life. So you have those two living room choices to live in.
Yeah.
You don't, when you haven't done the work, you don't want to think about what everything that's lurking under those layers. And
Yeah.
it's natural to fear removing even the first layer because you don't know what's going to come pouring out.
Mm-hmm.
And most of us, if we haven't done the work, we are like little pustules. I'm going to go back to my esthetician certification. We are like pustules, little pimples.
Mm-hmm.
And we're afraid to poke them. But if we don't, they're just going to keep getting fuller and bigger and fuller and bigger. It's a gross analogy, but we don't want to be full of pus.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
so at some point, and it will be the journey of your lifetime, and it will be the most important work of your life.
Mm-hmm.
The peeling back, the poking the pustule, and the cleaning it out.
Yeah.
That is why we are here, in my opinion.
Yep.
And that is the work that we are called to do, the breaking of the generational curses, the looking at the horribleness that has come down through our family lineage and why it was allowed to be and how it perpetuated over time and how it just continues to roll like a freight train down the track until somebody does something about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's, if you're called to be a generational curse breaker, your life is not going to be easy. If you are chosen, your life is not going to be easy. It is guaranteed to be difficult because that is why you have come here, is to do that work. That is the work of a lifetime. And you are not only doing it for yourself, you're doing it for the generations behind you, and you're doing it for the generations that come after you. It is the most important work of being human, in my opinion, is the peeling back and the addressing of the layers. And again, there will be blessings mixed amongst the pus and the pain.
Yeah.
But in order to get to those blessings, you're going to have to go through the icky, goopy parts.
Yeah.
And a lot of people just don't want to do it.
Yeah, that is so true. You explained that so well. I remember when I really decided a little over 5 years ago now to really dive in and start really unpacking. I got to a point in my life where I'm like, I don't want to live in this hypervigilant, anxious, feeling like I've got to save everybody all the time state, waiting for the next shoe to drop all the time. This is not the way I want to live my life. I'm seeing my daughters make different choices. They're not living their lives this way. There's got to be a better way to do this. And so I went on that journey and I went into it. And I laugh now. I'm going to go hardcore in therapy. I'm going to go for 6 months and really hit it hard. And then I'm going to be better.
Aren't you cute?
I know. That's hilarious.
Oh, you're so cute.
Funny. Here I am over 5 years later, and I will tell you, if I'd known what was coming, I don't know if I would have done it, but I can't imagine not doing it now. I can't imagine. I wouldn't be sitting here with you today having this conversation. I wouldn't have all the amazing relationships and conversations that I've built over the last 3+ years, not to mention other parts. I just can't imagine not doing it. And so if you're listening to Carrie and I today, know that you're worth it. Know that it is worth it. And there's resources and places and frameworks here to support you. And that's why we're here having these conversations today. So you feel like you can do this too.
I hope I'm in counseling the rest of my life. But with that said, I do want to put this out there. You need to be extremely careful in the selection of your counselor.
Absolutely.
Because if you get a bad one, they can undo you completely. And there are bad ones out there. And there are also a lot of narcissists that are and psychopaths that are in positions of authority. You have got to do due diligence, and you have got to make certain that your counselor meshes with your values and your why, that they understand you and that you understand them, and that they are open to being questioned about themselves. Because not all counselors, not any group of anybody is all good or all bad. But when you are going into counseling, you have basically agreed with life to be totally vulnerable. And if you are going into counseling unwilling to be totally open and vulnerable, then you're wasting your time. But in the process of doing that, you must make certain that your choice of counselor is a good, sound one.
Yeah, absolutely. Such important information. And listen to your instincts.
Yes.
They will tell you if this isn't the right match for you. And it's because nobody is all knowing. I don't care how many degrees they have or how much background history or if they worked for your best friend. That doesn't mean they're a match for you. And trust that inner knowing and that angst when it's telling you this might not be the right fit. And also know there is somebody out there for you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And don't just quit in your search. But I think another telling thing is if you have a counselor that is telling you, oh, in a year from now, you'll be all well. Or
absolutely.
Run, because nobody can tell you, but there's not a time frame on this work. It is entirely personal. And it does need to be self-paced because it can be dangerous, risky work. You're going to be opening yourself to looking at enormous amounts of pain, and in a lot of times in spaces doing it by yourself alone, and you need to be up to the challenge because it's very difficult work.
It's again that pause that we talked about. Don't be afraid to take the pause, and don't overdo your system, and give yourself time and space to process each thing as you go along. So good. Thank you so much, Carrie. Oh, so good. So much gold in this episode. I'm so excited.
Bless your heart. Really, truly. About all that you've shared. I feel as I've been taking notes.
Oh, that's wonderful. I love this. All right. We are getting down to the end here, but in living out feel, finding empowerment, embracing layers, which you have done, you continue to do in your life. Talk to me about the impact that has on your relationship with yourself, as well as your relationship with other people.
Okay, I'm writing. This time I'm not going down a rabbit hole. I'm writing this down. When you become healthier within yourself, you make healthier choices. And when you quit being run by unhealed core wounds, you start attracting healthy people. Consequently, in the course of that happening, your life becomes healthier. So My relationship with myself, and I think this is a perpetually evolving process. I mean, it's like anything. There are some days I think, oh, I could lose 10 pounds, and I kind of poke at myself. And then there are other days when I think that, and I think, quit tearing yourself apart. And for an old gal, you look pretty okay. And so it's a journey. It's still a journey. It's like
Absolutely.
another thing, you don't really arrive, and
Yeah.
you got to make peace with that liminal space. But I I am a firm believer in what you put out, you receive.
Mm.
Um, and not so much in the law of attraction-y kind of way, like everybody tries to do, the secret and all that. I'm not talking about that. But what you put out in your world and in your
Mhm.
life, you then receive.
Yeah.
And that's where the magic happens once you start to heal,
Mhm.
is you start putting out a healthier version of yourself,
Yeah.
healthier mindsets, healthier attitudes, more peace, more joy, more quiet, more contentment, more security within yourself. That then attracts healthier people to you. I have some very dear, dear, precious, healthy friends that I cherish. Um, I am not, and maybe this is a failing on my part, I am not that open to relationships, male, female, lovey-dovey relationships right now, because I'm focusing on other things. I love
Mhm.
and appreciate men. I think they're absolutely wonderful. I am so grateful for them. But I haven't been open to a relationship in a while because I've been building the publishing house with my business partner, Sandra, and I've been writing books like crazy, and working on other people's books. So my season right now has been being a 60-year-old woman, recovering from grief and trying to build a life with where I am right now. And it's so foreign to me. It's taken me some time to get my bearings and my footing, because it's like I woke up one day and everybody was speaking Greek and I
Yeah.
didn't know how to speak Greek. So I had to learn quickly. So a lot of what has happened to me in the last 3 years has been totally foreign,
Mm.
um, which has been incredibly scary and difficult and invigorating and thrilling all at the same time.
Yeah.
So the when you become more respectful toward yourself, you
Mhm.
then tend to attract people that will also be respectful of you and your humanity more so than in the past. And that
Yeah.
is definitely something that has been happening in my life. And I'm very grateful
Yeah.
for that. But it does still fall upon you to be consistent with your boundaries. And if you
Mhm.
see someone off in the distance that reeks a little bit of predator, or unhealthy or toxic, then you need to be tactful and set that boundary. And you need to be quick with setting those boundaries.
Mhm.
So it again, it all ties into everything. It becomes the implementation of pretty much everything we've talked about
Yeah.
today, but it has a bearing on everything.
Yeah.
Once you do the healing, it impacts every relationship that you have, whether it's business, romance, friendship, whatever.
Yeah.
It impacts every single person you interact with. And I think that's why it ultimately is the most important work you will ever do on this earthly plane as a human, because the energy you put out there causes a ripple.
Yes. Yes.
So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Again, really well said. Thank you so much for
Thank
that. And
you. Thank you.
it really, yeah. I mean, it just you emanate that energy, and then but also you talked about this. You've mentioned a couple of times. That's the whole purpose of these conversations, to give us a framework. Like, life has hills and valleys, canyons, mountains, and we live somewhere in the in between most of the time. But we need a framework to help keep us on the trail, because we're going to
Yeah.
fall off the trail. Surprises are going to happen, things we didn't see coming, all those kinds of different things. But if that framework's there and we're checking in with ourselves via the framework, then it can help keep us on track to being and living the way we were designed to and that we want to, that feels authentic and healthy to us.
Yeah.
And you're
And gratitude. is very
Yeah.
important to being grateful. I mean, with everything that has happened with fires and hurricanes and
Yeah.
people losing their homes, I have become so mindful of how luxurious it is to get out of a warm bed and have a cup of coffee in the morning.
Yeah.
There are people right now that they don't even have that.
No.
And of course, there are people around the world that never have that. But I mean,
Yeah.
just to just be grateful. And as you were speaking, I remembered an acquaintance I had one time. He was an older man. He'd had a very difficult life, and he had recently lost a leg. But his outlook was so precious. And this man was probably 70 when I was 18. And we were talking one day, and there are two bits of wisdom. His concept of the meaning of life, what made
Mm.
for a good life. He said, keep your stomach full and your bowels empty. He boiled it down to that. But then he also said to me, like you said, mountaintops and valleys. And he said, don't ever be afraid of the valleys, the dark valleys, because
Mm.
that's where all the big berries grow. That's where all the big,
Yeah.
good, juicy blackberries are, in the deep valleys.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, with the life he had led and having recently lost his leg, I mean, that was his take on things. Don't be afraid of the deep valleys, because that's where all
Mm.
the best berries are.
Yeah. Well,
And
and I think when you're living true and authentic to yourself and you're tending to yourself well, you can find the gratitude each day because you're made room for it. You've cleared out the
yeah,
gunk. You've felt the feelings. You've acknowledged the things that have happened. You aren't hiding or stuffing or living out of your core wounds. And it makes space to feel and acknowledge and see the gratitude.
yeah.
Yeah.
But even gratitude can be, you know, getting back to my dad and the worst of his dementia, it was hellish.
Mm.
It was hell for him, and it was hell for us, and it
Yeah.
was absolutely horrifying. And when the doctor diagnosed him, he came into the room and we were all there. And he sat down with Dad's file and he actually said, I think I know what's wrong with Billy Jack, and you all need to go home and pray I'm wrong. Because if I'm right,
Mm.
you are in for a trip through the bowels of hell. And I've only
Ugh.
seen one other case in my career,
Wow.
and this is going to be hellish. And unfortunately, he was right. But
Mm.
in the worst of my father's state, there were times when I went down into my bathroom, because I lived with them, because they
Hmm.
were, elderly, and I couldn't trust my mom's safety.
Sure.
So I lived with them. I would go down into my bathroom and lock the door, and I would cry,
Mm.
and then I would pray, thank you, Father, that Dad is still in my life, even though he's in this hellish, awful place, and this is absolutely horrible. Thank you that he is still in my life, and I can go upstairs and hug him.
Mm.
And so, even in the dark moments, um, thank you, Lord, that I'm alive to experience this. Thank you, Lord, that you're with me in this.
Mhm.
Thank you that there is hope that tomorrow will be better. Or if
Yeah.
not tomorrow, a year from now, it will be better. Or thank you, Lord, that you're walking this with us, that we're not having to do, you are here, and you can always find something. Thank you, Lord, that I have a carrot to eat for dinner tonight. I mean,
Yeah.
it's because there are people that don't.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Um, yeah, so it
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this great, grandiose gratitude journal. Oh, this happened, and
I
I had
know.
steak
Yeah.
and filet mignon for dinner and champagne and blah. It doesn't have to be that stuff.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah.
you that I have a clean pair of sheets to sleep on tonight,
Mhm.
and
Yeah. And a roof over
thank
my
you.
head.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Oh, so good. All right. We are down to the rapid fire. Name
Oh my,
five. I know.
I'm not good at that. You ought to know that. There's nothing rapid about me.
It's in name only. 5 activities that nourish you.
5 activities that nourish me: prayer, Daily walks when I can get them. I love my long morning walk. Five activities that nourish me. Okay, prayer, reading a good book, a nice Epsom salt soak with candles, and listening to
Mm.
good music.
Great. All right. And 5 words on how you want to feel the next 6 months.
Ooh, peaceful, successful, joyous. I would like to feel prosperous and be prosperous. Um, Loved/loving.
I
I
love that.
cheated. I threw an extra one in there, but the
That's
slash
all
came.
right. That's okay. We can blend them. They can put
Okay,
them all
thank you.
together.
Thank you.
You bet. All right. Carrie, tell people where they can find you and follow you. This will all be on our website at embracinglayers.com, on our resources page. We'll share it on our socials, but take some time right now to share with people real quick where they can find you and follow you.
Well, thank you very much. I I am co-director of a hybrid publishing house with my business partner and friend Sandra Morgan. So it is Morgan Pierce MediaPublishing.com. And they can reach me directly there at Carrie, Carrie, at morganpiercemediapublishing.com. I have an author page on Facebook, author Carrie E. Pierce. And then I have lots of social media that's just out there. But I do want to let your listeners know, oddly enough, there is another writer out there by the name of Carrie Pierce.
Oh.
So it is incredibly important that if you are searching for me or any of my books, that you do so under Carrie, Carrie, middle initial E for Elizabeth, Pierce, Pierce.
Okay.
So the E makes all the difference.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you for that. Thank you for that clarification. That's important.
Really?
All right. Thank you so much for your time today. This has just been a wonderful conversation, a treasure trove of insights and wisdom and resources. Listeners, I know there's so much. You're probably going to have to go back and listen. Bring your pen with you. Check out how you can follow Carrie and learn from her. If you're a writer, take a look at the ways she can help you with that. If it's a good fit for you, take a look at the books that she offers. She's got all kinds of things out there that are available, whether you're looking for children's books or other things that she's written. I know she's got something new coming out soon that's completely different than what she's done before. So, but check all those things out and take care of yourselves this week. And think about if you have some core wounds that need some addressing, that need some attention, that needs some time and some healing. Pause. That's going to be your takeaway this week. It's just pause this week. Sit with yourself. Think about what it is you need. You're worth it. You're valuable. This is a journey. And there's so many resources here that we want to share with you, both from this episode today, and just go to our resources page, and there's all kinds of things that will be linked in our show notes, as we talked earlier in the episode about caregiving and the kinds of things that are necessary to take care of yourself there. But Carrie, thank you so much for your time today.
Oh, Melissa, thank you. And I appreciate you, this opportunity, and your listeners. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, good. Well, I have too. I've learned so much. Thank you so much. Listeners, take good care of yourselves this week. Take a pause and have a great week. Hello, Melissa Crook here. Thank you so much for joining us on the Field Podcast today, Finding Empowerment, Embracing Layers. I hope you found today's framework and resources supportive and informative. To learn more about all that we offer here at the Embracing Layers Network, visit embracinglayers.com. You can go to our contact form to schedule me as a speaker for your next conference, workshop, or seminar. You can go to our book page to order our book that Jessica Garrison, our wonderful and talented writer and author, authored with my support. And engage with this framework in written form with your journal or in a book club with other women, inviting them on this journey with you. You can look at our resources page for all of the helpful and insightful resources our guests offer and share. You can find the schedule for our weekly Together We Feel women's panel conversations that we're holding each Monday on our YouTube channel. And you can find the links to all the spaces and places you can follow, engage with us on social media, and join our engagements that are happening on our Substack site. There is also a donation page where you can donate to support our work to ensure we can continue to bring you these incredible guests, conversations, and support. Thanks again for joining me this week. Share with your friends and give us a review on your favorite listening platform. Your feedback helps us ensure we're bringing you the content that will best support you and having an empowered, embracing layers journey. Take good care, and thanks for giving us some of your valuable time today. We truly appreciate you so deeply.